Morning, Leanne, and thank you so much for welcoming us here today. It was a really pleasant time that we spent here already in the fields. I wanted to ask you a couple of questions. Can you tell us a little bit about the Bortoli history?
Sure.
And how you probably relate to it yourself?
Oh, absolutely. The company was started by my grandfather in 1928. Up in New South Wales. That's where our main winery is, and that's where the mothership still is. Mm-hmm. So the rest of my family are all based up in New South Wales, and I'm the lucky one that's down here. So when my grandfather started the business, he was like a lot of migrants who came out from Europe and was just prepared to work hard, saved his money, and was able to buy a small farm. And from there we just bought subsequent farms, and then in 1987 my family bought this property here in the Yarra Valley, and my husband and I were the lucky ones to be able to be offered the job of coming here to manage this property. So I've been here since 1989, and we have two daughters, and so they've both grown up here. And I think what's interesting for me is I have spent most of my life living in the middle of a vineyard opposite a winery.
So you know about the wine a lot?
Yes, I think growing up in the wine industry, it's sort of a bit like osmosis. It's happening around us, and for me it was never, I don't think I ever looked at it as the job that my father did or the job that my grandfather did. It was a lifestyle, really. And for us, the vineyard in New South Wales, the vineyard and the winery, that was my playground as a child, and likewise with my brothers. And then since I've been living here now in Victoria, it's similar to our two daughters. They've grown up in the same way that I have grown up in the winery. And there's always something happening. I think being in a vineyard, you actually see the seasons happen. It's when spring, when everything just starts to come out in springtime, and you get the young growth after winter. And then, of course, summer, where it is quite warm. Now that we're coming into autumn, all the fruit's being picked, the winemakers are going crazy in the winery, trying to get everything that we've been growing for the last 12 months into the winery. And usually harvest goes, for here, we start early February and we go usually until early April. So it is a hectic time.
Depending on the grapes, right?
Yes, that's right. We usually start with a Chardonnay.
Yep.
And Pinot Gris, and then we move on to Pinot Noir, which is being picked at the moment. Yep. And then that follows on with Shiraz, Cabernet. The last variety that we normally pick is Nebbiolo. And Nebbiolo is an interesting variety because it's an Italian variety. And I think for us, with our Italian heritage, to actually be growing some Italian varieties is pretty exciting.
The smell on the grounds is amazing. Like the minute you open the car and get out of the car, it just that Mediterranean smell of the trees and
the country, yes. And you're probably getting a bit of the smell of vintage as well, just with all the fruit being picked. And
I love it.
Yes, it is.
Can you tell us a little bit about your maybe success stories and the challenges that you experience at the moment?
I think one of the biggest success stories for our family was when we decided to buy this property here in the Yarra Valley, because before then we had been based in New South Wales, and then when we bought into this area, and for us it was a cooler climate. So we were able to make wines like cool climate Chardonnay and cool climate Pinot that's very conducive to this area. And for us, we have grown the vineyard to I think we started with something like 26 acres, So, it was only just a few hectares, and now we have 180 hectares in just this vineyard alone.
Lots of work.
Yes, and we grow the main varieties would be Chardonnay, Pinot, Shiraz, Cabernet, but we are experimenting with some other different varieties like Gamay, Nebbiolo. We also have a bit of Sangiovese, Pinot Blanc. So it's
just do some research as well, right?
We do.
To come with something new in the market.
Yes. And I think it's just rather than just saying, well, these are the wines we make, and they're the only ones that we're going to make. It's looking at what we feel might appeal to people, and also what varieties are suited to our patch of land.
Absolutely, absolutely. What like how you see the future maybe for this is the family business?
Yes.
How do you see the future?
Who knows? But I think when we look back,
any plans you have?
Well, I think when we look back and sort of, and so with these two wines here, I think this one, it's certainly a very special wine for us, being a botrytis dessert wine. And when we first came out with this wine, it was quite revolutionary, I think, in Australia. Sure, there were these styles of wines being made in France and Germany and other countries. But not really, there was never anything quite like this in Australia. And that probably was where people looked at us and thought, wow, what are these people doing? And then, as I mentioned earlier, when we moved here into the Yarra Valley and started growing Chardonnay and Pinot, I think for us, looking at the future, it's probably looking at the wine styles or grapes that can grow in a warmer climate, but produce very, very interesting food-friendly wines. And so for us, we have a vineyard in Heathcote, and we also bought into Rutherglen about 2 years ago. And so up there where they are mainly warmer areas. So for us, it's about experimenting with different varieties, and some of the things that we are planting are things like Grenache and Grenache Blanc, and some of the Portuguese varieties, but they make such delicious wines. So it's hard to know. I think for us, it's about always challenging ourselves, and we're not afraid to give things a go. So we're prepared to plant something, and if it doesn't work out, we go, okay, we won't do that again, but we'll always be experimenting.
Yeah, this is how the best things happen, right? From accidents and
they do. Yes. And I think even for us as a company, we when was it, about 10 years ago, we started making pale dry rosé, and in Australia at that time the trend was more for sweeter rosés, and they were quite dark pink in colour. And when my husband Stephen and I were in France many years ago, when we were in the south of France, and we were drinking the gorgeous pale dry rosés, and it was warm summer days, and I was just looking at it saying, this is what we should be making in Australia, this is what people should be drinking. But if you were to speak to the people who do analysis and salespeople, they would say, oh no, there's no market for pale dry rosé. But I think it was only because Australians they weren't exposed to it. So we started a campaign called Rosé Revolution, and the first rosés we made was our La Bohème Pinot Rosé, which is probably one of the most popular rosés in Australia, and it's a beautiful label, but it's pale, it's dry. It's just perfect at any time.
Thank you so much for today. Really appreciate it, Leanne.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
My pleasure.